My next guest just released a brand new book on a topic which has really divided Catholics and caused such controversy. In it, he separates fact from fiction regarding the causes of this scandal. Here to discuss the truth about clergy sex abuse, clarifying the facts and causes, I'm joined by President of the Catholic League, Bill Donohue. Bill, thanks for being here. Bill, before we get to the new book, the U.S. Bishops' fall meeting began in Baltimore this week. USCCB President Jose Gomez has come under fire for a speech he gave earlier this month where he seemed to label so-called social justice movements as pseudo-religions. He wrote, with the breakdown of the Judeo-Christian worldview and the rise of secularism, political belief systems based on social justice or personal identity have come to fill the space that Christian belief and practice once occupied. Bill, what's your reaction to these comments?
Right. I thought his speech was absolutely brilliant. I think it was one of the most important intellectual statements in recent times. He's talking about a subject which sociologists have been talking about for about 150 years, quite frankly, which is that when the heart of the culture in our society, that would be the Judeo-Christian heritage, when it begins to wither, then there's a power vacuum. Something will take its place. And we've seen the de-Christianization of the Western world. That's what Gomez is getting at. And it's being replaced by these ersatz substitute religions, such as this critical race theory and the like. That people are clinging to. Now, it's not just Gomez who's talking this way. Columbia University professor, he's an African-American, John McWhorter, has written a book about woke racism, and that's exactly what happens. It's become a new religion. In other words, these people don't have the kind of spiritual upbringing that they once had, and they're looking now for some meaning in their life. And, you know, some people are overreacting that Gomez is trying to say that social justice is somehow not proper. The Catholic Church has a long, rich history of promoting social justice. But he's saying it's been hijacked by people who have another agenda. And I think that the critics of him are way off base. We're glad to vigorously defend him. And when they have their silly petitions organized by George Soros-funded entities like Faith in Public Life and Faithful America, you know what a game it is. Archbishop Gomez gave a great speech. He should be commended and not condemned.
Bill, earlier this month, you reported on a Pew survey on attitudes toward the separation of church and state, or about the separation of church and state. It was called, in U.S., far more support than oppose separation of church and state. Now, in your estimation, was that an accurate study? And did the headline paint an appropriate picture of what we're dealing with here?
No, and I have to say, I'm generally speaking an admirer of Pew research on religion and on American public life. I think their methodology is generally quite good. This was not one of their better surveys. The questions were rather awkwardly phrased. They left out so much. They had so many holes in it. It was amazing. They're asking, for example, about asking people, do you believe that you should? Can you put religious symbols on public property and the like? Well, it matters what the public property is. If it's in front of City Hall, that's one thing, because the average person could conclude that perhaps the government is endorsing religion. There's nothing wrong with putting a religious symbol on public property, which is a public forum, such as a public park. They never made these distinctions. It makes a difference as to who's buying the religious symbol, whether it's the government or a private party. They did the same thing with prayer in the schools. No, a teacher can't lead the students in a prayer, but the government can't stop the students from having a prayer. So there are critical distinctions. I thought it was a rather sloppy poll, and it was oriented clearly toward those who believe that we should have religion should recede in society. Look, the church is not encroaching on the state. That's not our problem in American society today. The problem is, and it's throughout the Western world, it's the state encroaching on religion. And with the support of the Biden administration, we have our hands full.
I want to get your take on this rather odd story. The U.S. Supreme Court has thrown out a Northern California Catholic hospital's appeal after being sued for not performing a hysterectomy on a transgender patient. Now, the High Court is declining to hear the appeal. Bill, your reaction on a Catholic hospital being sued for a case like this and over this sort of surgery?
Well, I thought it was regrettable what the Supreme Court did. They're going to have to face this issue. I mean, you can't run from it any longer. First of all, we can't live in a world of fiction. All right. If you have XX chromosome, then you're a male. If you have XX, you're female. That can't change. You can, in your head, you can think that you're something else. That's fine, you know. And sometimes people in the asylum are the most noticeable to feel that way. The idea that a Catholic hospital should entertain the fiction that somebody who considers himself to be a man, even though the person's a woman, and then we're going to go over these certain operations, that's not going to fly. There is such a thing as religious liberty. I know that the Equality Act promoted by the Biden administration does want to basically cancel Catholic hospitals, either that or they accede to the secular commands, such as in transgender surgeries and the like. I think that maybe, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe the Supreme Court are looking for a more clear-cut case, because they can't run from this. This has to be decided, and it has to be decided in favor of religious liberty. Either that or religious liberty in this country will not exist.
Bill, let's talk about your new book, The Truth About Clergy Sex Abuse. What made you write and release this book now? I mean, you've been grappling with this, you've been reporting on this issue for 20 years.
Well, that's right. And after seeing all the lies and all the disinformation, misinformation about this subject, and having collected so much data over 20 years, I decided to put my sociological training to practice and read virtually everything that you could read on the subject. And I thought, well, you know, time has come. We have to separate the fact from the fiction. We have to deal with some forbidden areas that you're not supposed to talk about. If you put together the lies that have been told, along with the cowardice that approaches this subject, it is stunning. So I decided to marshal my resources, look at my own research on this, some of which I've written in the past, and look at whole new volumes of research. Because most of the stuff out there, they're not written by social scientists. It's mostly written by people on the left. And although there's some good works by some conservative authors on this subject, but there's nothing by a social scientist. So I decided the time has come. I'm tired of the lies that have been told.
In the preface, you write, over the past half century, the Catholic Church has experienced two scandals: the clergy sex abuse crisis, which was caused by priests and bishops, and the exploitation of it, which was caused by strident critics of the Catholic Church and those profiting from legal cases. Both have resulted in great damage to the Church. Bill, what do you mean by these two scandals, and how have they fueled one another?
Well, the first one is the one that's familiar to most people. You have two parties to the scandal within the Church, and that is to say the enabling bishops and the molesting priests. I look in the book as to why some bishops were enablers and why some priests were molesters. That's a big chunk of the book. But I also look at something I call Scandal 2, and I was encouraged by Mary Ann Glendon when she liked that line of thought that I was developing a number of years ago and encouraged me to go forward with it. I decided to do so. And there I'm talking about a different kind of scandal. The people who won't let it go. The people who are poisoning the public mind, the people who want the public to believe that nothing's ever changed, that the scandal is ongoing, the people who are profiting from it, either economically or ideologically, or in some cases both. They want us to believe that this will never end. And you do have some people on the far left and on the far right who have a vested interest in keeping the scandal alive, as well as states' attorneys generals, victims groups. Certainly Hollywood has played a major role in this development. The media for their own ratings and ideological predilections. So yeah, that's a scandal in and of itself. We're not being told the truth about the tremendous progress that the Catholic Church has made. It's indisputable. It's not even a debatable question. And you can talk about why the problems took place in the first place and what led to some of the progress. That's all fair game. But the fact that we've made progress and all these groups don't want to mention it, that's a problem.
I want to dive into this first chapter. You begin by saying Catholics don't own this problem. Well, who does, Bill? And shouldn't the Church be held to a higher standard than corporations or Hollywood or public schools?
There's no question the Catholic Church should be held to a higher standard. If a child is molested by a priest or a plumber, that child is harmed. It matters to me, certainly as a Catholic, that if it's a priest, that's even more outrageous because he has a higher calling and we expect more from them. All I'm simply saying is this. Wherever you have adults interacting with minors on a regular basis, such as in the Boy Scouts, such as in camp counselors, you see it a lot in Hollywood, clearly, obviously in the public schools. Unfortunately, you're going to see a much higher incidence of this kind of problem than most people would expect. And they're given a pass. Never mind the sexual misconduct that takes place in CBS and NBC, in the corporate world. It's ubiquitous. There's not an institution which is without this kind of problem. Google had their employees walk out in protest because of all the sexual misconduct. Now, all I'm saying is this. While we should hold the church to a higher standard, all priests are entitled to due process rights like every other person in this country. And if the media are truly concerned about the problem, namely the molestation of a minor, then it shouldn't matter who the identity is of the molester. But it does matter. When Amy Berg out of Hollywood tried to put together a movie about or documentary, I should say, about the problem of pedophilia in Hollywood, she was blocked. And it came out only in a few small cinemas at the end. When I see CNN, for example, doing these big exposés on the Catholic Church, saying not a word about any other religion, as if we own this, saying not a word about what's going on in the public schools and the like, then you realize there's an agenda. When I see the lawyers always going after the Catholic Church, nobody else, they go after the Catholic Church because they know that we're a big fat target. And we know we've been around for 2,000 years. We're hierarchical. We have a pope at the top. They think we have a lot of money. And if you can discredit the moral voice of the Catholic Church, then you're on your way to discrediting the voice of evangelicals, Orthodox Jews, Muslims, and Mormons who also share our idea of sexual ethics.
Bill, in the book, you go into great detail about the outside enablers of this scandal, this sex abuse scandal. But I want to focus for a moment on the enablers inside the church. Why were so many bishops guilty of either abuse themselves or cover-ups in this scandal?
Well, I look at several different reasons for this, and I want the viewer to understand, when I give an explanation, it's not a justification. It's just simply a sociological understanding of what's going on. Such, for example, in-group favoritism. It's natural that people who are close to others, be a spouse, could be a parent with a teenage son who got in trouble, he got drunk on a Friday night in front of a 7-Eleven, the cops bring him home. The natural instinct is to try and protect him. The bishop doesn't want to create a scandal. They didn't understand where they were going with this, but a lot of them wanted to show favoritism to the priest and say, listen, we were going to deal with this guy, Father X, but the problem is that we don't want this to get out. This kind of problem, and I've seen it in the book when I go through all these other organizations. It happened, as I say, at CBS, at NBC, all these places. Again, it's not justification, but it's natural to protect the people whom you're close to so that they won't get hurt. But they should have understood you're dealing here with crimes, not just with offenses.
You wrap up the first part of the book, Bill, by addressing what are considered popular explanations for this scandal. I want to get into a few of these explanations and why you think they're wrong very quickly. Priestly celibacy. People say, well, if they weren't celibate, they wouldn't be chasing down victims and acting out sexually. Your response?
Well, we had celibacy in the 1940s and 50s, and we didn't have this problem. And it's not like as if it was hidden. No, we didn't have this problem. Did we have priests who were inclined to be molesters? You bet we did, because almost all of the molesters were homosexuals. So we certainly had homosexual priests back in the 40s and 50s, but the culture was different. Therefore, they didn't act out. Celibacy is not the problem. The problem is the culture that allowed this thing to reign. And by the way, in terms of the bishop enablers, I must mention one thing, Raymond, and that is the role of therapists. They always get a pass. The bishops listened to the therapists who thought they could fix anybody. That was the zeitgeist. That was the spirit of the times. We can take Father X and we can fix him. No, they overestimated their authority.
What about the explanation of opportunity or clericalism? We hear those explanations bandied about as well.
Well, the opportunity thesis says that the reason why boys were molested more than girls is because priests had access to altar boys. They've had access to girls now for decades. We haven't seen a sharp increase in the number of girls getting molested by priests. That argument simply doesn't work. Clericalism is what was an embarrassment as an argument in 2019 at the Vatican Summit. Almost everybody spoke about clericalism as a cause of sexual abuse. Look, clericalism can be used as an understanding as to why some bishops enabled that form of elitism. But no minor was ever abused because of clericalism. He was abused because of molestation, because of something else that was driving the molester. So clericalism is a dodge. At best, it addresses the enabling priest. It says absolutely nothing about the molesting priest because they don't want to talk about the subject of homosexuality. That's the great taboo.
Yeah, and I want to get into that because you probe that in this book, and it's an explosive claim to a lot of ears and a lot of people reading. But I want to start with this. While the church has been very clear in condemning abuse of minors, it seems to be awfully tolerant with clerics acting out with young men or women in some cases. Isn't that a problem, Bill?
Oh, it certainly is. And if you read the reports of the John Jay study on this, the two studies, both of them were done quite well. And you take a look at the work of so many different psychiatrists have looked at this. Virtually all of the molesters of minors were also having sex with other men. And that meant, in most cases, other men in the seminaries or in the priesthood. So you can't divorce one from the other. Yes, it's possible for you to be having sex with somebody of the same sex as an adult and not be a molester, but in too many cases it was. And if, in fact, the priests voluntarily take a vow of chastity, nobody asked them to do this, then why don't they enforce these norms? And there is a relaxation here, a much more permissive attitude toward that, when in fact they should treat it maybe not as a form of abuse, but clearly as a violation of their professed vows.
In part 2 of The Truth About Clerical Sexual Abuse, you go into great detail about what you believe to be the true origins of this abuse. The role of evil gets a chapter here, as does dissent in the church and dissidence. How has that combination facilitated this scandal, in your estimation?
I don't think most priests who molested were evil. I do think that they were sick men. I do reserve the category of evil for people like Maciel, who had sex with boys and girls and people of all different ages and fathered children illegitimately, and who on his own deathbed refused confession. That's a manifestation of evil. When you rape seminarians and you invite 5 men over knowing you have 3 beds in your apartment down in Seagirt in New Jersey, I'm talking about McCarrick, and you have sex with the men, you have violated them not only sexually, you have violated them in a very sacred way. These men are studying for the priesthood. That's the hand of the devil at work there. Now, in terms of the dissidents, oh yeah, they certainly play a role. Look, I've read the reports, the self-reports of a lot of these sick men, people like Paul Shanley and many others. They will come right out and make it very, very clear that they took it as a green light, that these dissident professors in the seminaries were basically giving them rationalization. And even the John Jay researchers found the same thing. I'm not saying that I'll give you an example. There's back in the 1970s, you had 2 books by different authors with the same title, Human Sexuality. One by Crooks and Bauer. It's still taught in the seminaries. I mean, not in the seminaries. It's taught in the college and universities today. The other one by Anthony Kosnick. He was a priest. In both cases, they said we should not be judgmental about any sexual act. Kosnick even went so far as to say homosexuality, bestiality, they're all morally equal. You can't make any of these judgments. So this is being taught in the 1970s, the worst decade in the history of the Catholic Church in America, the 1970s. They were teaching these men not to make moral judgments about every form of sexual expression. Now, to the average, normal, healthy guy, if you hear this kind of nonsense, you're not going to go out and molest anybody. But what if you are somewhat disordered to begin with? What if you have some serious issues? And now you're hearing or you're reading through the National Catholic Reporter that we should be in rebellion against the Catholic Church's teachings on sexuality because it was the sexual ethics of the church which caused the scandal. You're going to feel there's no problem. Remember what Shanley said. He said the same thing that Harry Hayes said, the founder of the gay movement in this country, and people like Larry Kramer, another gay activist. It's the kid who's the seducer. It's the kid who's the abuser. Don't blame me. The young kids have the problem, not me. And when you are in constant rebellion against the church's teachings on marriage and sexuality, ordination, and celibacy, yeah, some guys who were inclined to act out, now they've gotten all the rationalizations they want.
Bill, you do bring out homosexuals and point to them as part and parcel of this sex abuse crisis. Now, your critics, some of whom I've read who've already seen this book, they say you're unfairly singling out one group. You're blaming them exclusively, equating homosexuality with abuse and abusers. Is that what you're doing here?
No, I've been saying for years that while most of the molesting priests were gay, most gays are not molesters. I am saying this, and this I learned from the John Jay study. If you read what the priests themselves are saying, the molesting priests, it's the emotional and sexual immaturity which homosexuals have that accounts for the high incidence of abuse. And that was known by Freud. It was known by Jung. It's known by the molesting priests today. We're talking about psychosexual development. So many homosexuals as compared to heterosexuals have been stunted. They reached a level in their adolescence and it stops. They don't grow any further. And that's why they relate to youngsters. They relate to people who are adolescents. They're stuck in their adolescence. That doesn't mean that every homosexual is that way. I'm not saying homosexuality causes sexual abuse. In matter of fact, I pose the question and say it doesn't. But there is what they call in sociology intervening variables. If there is a disproportionate number of homosexuals who are involved in the sexual abuse of minors in and out of the church, and it's out of the church as well, then something must be driving it. And I am absolutely convinced it's the emotional and sexual immaturity which marks so many homosexuals that accounts for their deviant behavior with regard to minors.
Bill, I'm almost out of time. I have a minute. You have a doctorate in sociology. I mean, we just heard you cite letter and verse of this particular discipline. You've been covering this story from the beginning, crunching numbers, not only in the Catholic Church, but really across society. In writing the new book, what did you discover that surprised you? Did you learn anything new from the data and looking at it in this new light?
Well, I learned actually from the molesting priests how honest they were. I wasn't really up to date on that. So much of the material I've been gathering over many, many years. I knew, for example, that we've made great progress. We're down to single digits now of the average number of accusations made against the priest in any given year. The latest figure is six substantiated cases out of 50,000 members of the clergy. That's 99.9% of the priests with no accusation made against them. But I am very much concerned about the way the media have exploited this issue, the uneven table that they have on this. The fact that the role of homosexuality is taboo, so we're all supposed to zip it. No, we are called as Catholics to tell the truth, not to shade it.
Bill Donohue, thank you for being here. The Truth About Clergy Sexual Abuse, Clarifying the Facts and the Causes by Bill Donohue, published by Ignatius Press, is available at bookstores everywhere and online, including EWTN's catalog. Bill, thanks for the thought-provoking deep dive into this issue, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.